This is BBC News. I'm Chris Eakin. The headlines at 6. Protests continue in Egypt as at least 36 people are killed in clashes overnight.
And I'm Lise Doucette in Cairo's Tahrir Square, where there's fireworks and festivities among those Egyptians who support the military action to remove Mohamed Morsi.
After nearly 10 years of legal battles, the controversial Muslim cleric Abu Qatada is expected to be deported this evening. The row between Labour and its biggest union backer, now the outgoing Falkirk MP, accuses union officials of arrogance.
The wait is over officially now.
A thumping win for the British and Irish Lions against Australia as they claim their first series win for 16 years. And France's Marion Bartoli wins Wimbledon in style, beating Germany's Sabine Lisicki in straight sets. Well, hello, very good evening. After all of the deaths in Egypt, there are more demonstrations this evening. Let's cross live to Cairo to our correspondent, Lise Doucette.
Yes, and we're broadcasting from the iconic birthplace of Egyptians' revolution 2 years ago. And now Egyptians who still gather here say it's the birthplace of a second Egyptian revolution. It's 7 o'clock in the evening, and as the sun sets, larger crowds are gathering here, but still a small number. It's a scene of fireworks and festivities. These are the people who welcomed the military action on Wednesday to oust the elected president, Mohamed Morsi. But on the other side of Cairo, in the east of the city, thousands of people have gathered today, calling for the restoration of the person they call the legitimately elected president, Mohamed Morsi. They say there will be no dialogue with Egypt's military rulers until he is restored. But today was also a day to bury the dead on both sides of Egypt's political divide. We have this report from Alim Makboul here in Cairo.
It's been the worst violence of this new, startling transition in Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood supporters decided it was time their voice was heard. But demonstrations turned to clashes, in some places with the police, in others with the army. And into the night, close to Tahrir Square, they fought those protesters who'd helped bring down their leader, Mohamed Morsi. Fireworks, rocks and eventually live rounds were used. More were killed and injured. Well, this is exactly what Egyptians had feared. Right here in the centre of Cairo, running battles between opponents and supporters of Mohamed Morsi. And nobody thinks this is the end of it. The Muslim Brotherhood's coming under more pressure. These pictures appear to show another major figure in the organisation, Khairat al-Shater, being arrested. Morsi supporters so shocked by these events, so they won't be kept quiet. We're going to continue our protest here, says this man. President Morsi has to be released and reinstated as Egyptian president. Both sides are readying themselves for further shows of strength. Unless there's a political solution, security here could just disintegrate further. Alim Makboul, BBC News in Cairo.
Well, as the day wore on, the mood became more somber and angry as the Muslim Brotherhood supporters buried 5 of their dead who were killed in yesterday's clashes between those who support and those who oppose Mohamed Morsi. So we had this update from Alim Makboul at a protest with the Muslim Brotherhood supporters.
Well, this is the place that Muslim Brotherhood supporters have really made their base in recent days. As you can see, they are still gathering here in spite of what's happened in the last 24 hours. They decided now was the time to raise their voice, say they were upset at what had happened, that their leader had been deposed in the way he had, and the resentment is only increasing. You can see people here with messages to President Morsi to stick where he is, saying that legitimacy and the people are with him. You see lots of Egyptian flags, pictures of President Morsi as well. but with the detentions of their leaders, with the deaths of protesters in recent days, the shutting down of Islamist channels across Egypt, these people are becoming more and more angry. And the question is, how is Egypt going to bring these people back in from the cold?
Halim Makbul, but at this moment, a lot of Egyptians' focus is turning away from the politics of the street to politics of the meetings today, where the military met with leaders of Egypt's many political groups. And there are credible reports that the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency and a political figure here, Mohamed al-Baradei, will be sworn in as Egypt's new interim prime minister. Reports from our own reporter who was at the meeting earlier today said that all factions across Egypt's political divide supported his candidacy, except for the Salafist Al-Noor party. And of course, the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't present because they say they won't take part in any discussions until Mohamed Morsi is reinstated. So it looks like fairly certain, although this has to be officially confirmed, that he will accept that post and be sworn in, but he could well be the new man to take over at the helm here. Let's just discuss these latest developments. We're joined here at our broadcasting position by Dr. Mohammed, who's a professor at Cairo University of Political Science. Dr. Hamad, there seems to be credible reports that Mohamed al-Baradei will be the interim prime minister. How would that go down here in Egypt now, do you think?
I think it's a move that's welcomed by many Egyptians and opposed by other many Egyptians. It's very risky. You never know what happens the next day. Baradei is a very respected man. He's very well reputed, but you cannot deny the massive attempts by many political forces, including Islamists, to defame al-Baradei and his reputation. So it's a very promising and risky choice, because on the one hand, Baradei is a man of capabilities in terms of administration, and this is something we need. I think he's a guy who can reach out for different political factions, and if he managed to get in his new cabinet accepted names and efficient names, that would be an asset in his working in his favor. But on the other hand, many people criticize al-Baradei for his hesitant to step in the last 2.5 years, because reports have been all over that many times he was asked to step in, or that when we had the presidential election, he was running for the post and then he was thrown at the very last moment. So it's a promising and risky.
But the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is refusing to take part in any dialogue until Mohamed Morsi is reinstated, that means there can't be the kind of reconciliation, to use the word, that Egypt needs.
I think it's a matter of negotiation. I think the Muslim Brotherhood are raising the level of demands that they insist on reinstating Mohamed Morsi, and they know that this is irreversible. What happened is irreversible. But I think they're pressuring to reduce the damage and save whatever they can save of the group in itself, of the party, of their existence, and their ability to affect the political formula in the next few years.
Do you think that after this period of high emotions subsides, if and when it subsides, there will be able to find a path forward?
The Muslim Brotherhood, you mean?
Well, with all sides.
I think this is the most important issue for me, because the country is divided on the level of the street. As much as you see here in Tahrir Square, you find thousands on the other side, and the amount of negative feelings and hatred among people in the street is enormous, and anyone who's going to step in this crucial time in Egypt needs to be very sincere and very consistent with starting a national reconciliation. Other than this, we will not go anywhere. We'll be stuck where we are now.
And a very important point as well for Egypt in its history. Dr. Amal Hamad, thank you very much for joining us here in Cairo as we wait for official confirmation that Mohamed al-Baradei will be Egypt's caretaker prime minister. He seems to have broad support among the leaders of many of Egypt's diverse political groups, but not everyone is on board, and certainly judging from the mood on the streets, with two rival demonstrations taking place. Polarized nation, a nation which needs leaders to bring it back together. We'll keep an eye on all the developments.
OK, well, Lise Doucette there in Cairo. Apologies for the line breaking up towards the end there. But that's the scene live in Tahrir Square. There is a rival demonstration elsewhere in Cairo, which is also showing a considerable crowd, and that is a pro-Morsi, pro-Muslim Brotherhood demonstration elsewhere in Cairo, which we'll see a little bit later. Those two demonstrations gathering their crowds again this evening, just like they did yesterday as well, after Friday prayers. Apologies for the technical hiccup at the end there. Now, preparations have been made to finally deport the radical Muslim cleric Abu Qatada to Jordan. It's understood he'll be put on a military plane from RAF Northolt tonight. Abu Qatada has spent 8 years trying to block attempts to send him to Jordan, where he faces terrorism charges. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly has been to Amman to find out what awaits the man described by a British judge as a truly dangerous individual.
It's 20 years since Abu Qatada left here. Now he is due to return home to face the justice system he tried to evade for so long. At his family's cafe, his relatives refuse to talk to the media. A family friend maintains the evidence against him is weak.
I do believe that Abu Qatada will not be found guilty in this case.
So you think he could soon be a free man here?
Inshallah, we hope that Abu Qatada will be free in Jordan.
So what exactly is he accused of? Well, the charges go back to the late 1990s. From his base in London, Abu Qatada is said to have been part of 2 terrorist plots. The aim was to strike at Western interests in Jordan. In one plot, this leading hotel in the capital, Amman, was amongst the potential targets. A planned visit by the Pope was also on the list. But the cell was being monitored and the plot was thwarted in an international operation involving the FBI.
They were talking about bodies being in bags. So lots and lots of bodies, a lot of dead people. That's what they wanted to accomplish. And unfortunately, they could have been able to accomplish it.
This is where Abu Qatada is set to stand trial, the State Security Court, in appearance a military installation, and in recent days the scene of demonstrations against the detention of a group of radical Islamists. Unusually, Abu Qatada has been promised that his case will be heard by civilian rather than military judges. For more than a year, British ministers and officials have been coming to Jordan to try to find a way to bring Abu Qatada back here. The treaty under which he's returning is a political and diplomatic achievement. Now the focus switches to this country's legal system. International eyes will be upon Jordan's treatment of its high-profile prisoner. The country's justice minister is adamant there is a powerful case against him.
Abu Qatada was charged with conspiracy to perform terrorist acts. And once he is back and tried, this may shed more light on his role in financing and planning, financing terrorist acts and planning for terrorist acts.
Accused of being an enemy of this state, the preacher is preparing for his latest court battle. Now it is Jordan's turn to deal with Abu Qatada. June Kelly, BBC News, Amman.
Well, let's get the very latest from our correspondent John Brain. He is outside Belmarsh Prison, where Abu Qatada has been held in south-east London. So is this really going to be it, John?
Well, it does appear, Chris, that after nearly a decade of overstaying his welcome, Abu Qatada is now spending his last few hours here on British soil. We understand that later tonight he'll be driven out of here and taken to an RAF base where a plane will be waiting to fly him to Jordan. That plane due to take off, we understand, in the early hours of the morning. So he will be in Jordan tomorrow, if all goes to plan, and will be facing, as we've been hearing in June's report there, trial for alleged terrorism offences.
And what's interesting here is that a couple of months ago he had a change of heart, in that he appears anyway to actually want to go now. I mean, there's no explanation for that, is there?
Well, he's been fighting extradition for all these years. It's cost the British government £1.7 million, most of that in legal fees in their attempts to get rid of him. What he's always argued, or his lawyers have always argued on his behalf, is that he wouldn't face a fair trial in Jordan because he feared that evidence would be used against him which would have been obtained through torture. Now, the UK and Jordan recently signed this new treaty which guaranteed that that won't happen, that in his trial, which as we've been hearing will be before a civilian court, no evidence which was obtained by torture will be admissible. Now, he seems to have accepted that. Whether he just got fed up of the fight, whether he knew that ultimately one day he would have to go back and just thought he'd had enough, or whether he truly believes that he can now get a fair trial, we don't know. But that certainly is the reason being given by his lawyers.
OK, John, thank you very much. Thank you. John Brain outside Belmarsh. Right, this is BBC News. Let's have a look at the headlines today. At least 36 people have been killed in Egypt in clashes between opponents and supporters of the country's ousted president. That's as protesters gather again in the capital, Cairo. This protest against the government, Abu Qatada. After nearly 10 years of legal battles, the controversial Muslim cleric is expected to be deported this weekend. And the row between Labour and its biggest union backer escalates. Now the outgoing Falkirk MP, Eric Joyce, accuses union officials of arrogance. In a moment, we'll have the latest on an explosion in Quebec. A train carrying petroleum products has been derailed. Now, let's get back to one of those stories in the headlines, the row between Labour and the union Unite. The MP for Falkirk, Eric Joyce, that's the constituency at the heart of this, he has intervened in this whole row. He of course decided to stand down after he was convicted of assault in a House of Commons bar. Well, he's accused Unite, the union at the centre of this, of being arrogant and irresponsible for trying to install its preferred candidate. Here's our political correspondent Ross Hawkins.
This all began with Eric Joyce's conviction for assault in a House of Commons bar. It meant Labour had to choose a new candidate to contest his Falkirk seat at the next election. Allegations about what happened next here have seen the party hand their report on the affair to the police. And now Eric Joyce has had his say about the conduct of the Unite Union as they try to get their preferred candidate picked. Writing in The Guardian, he alleges the Unite campaign was largely ignoring existing members. The strategy seemed to be to swamp them with new ones, whose membership Unite had paid for. He'd heard of people getting letters from Labour welcoming them to the party, he says, when they hadn't applied to become members.
What we're seeing today in these allegations, if people have been signed up to vote to choose new MPs without their knowledge, that's criminal activity.
With Unite saying they've done nothing wrong, Labour faces a delicate balance between talking tough and not alienating the unions.
There are lots of affiliates of the Labour Party. There are lots of different people who are part of our party. Look, I'm proud of that. Let's not forget who we're talking about. Members of trade unions. I mean, if one of us was ill and there was an ambulance at a writer outside this studio, we'd probably be put in it by a trade union member.
When Ed Miliband talked about a new generation and a new politics, this row wasn't what he had in mind. He'll have more to say, but winning a scrap with the party's biggest donor won't be easy.
Ross Hawkins reporting there. Riot police in the Turkish city of Istanbul have fired tear gas and they've used water cannon. This is to disperse demonstrators again who have tried to enter the city's Taksim Square. A few thousand people converged on the square, trying to get into a nearby park. It's been cordoned off since violent protests took place in the area several weeks ago. Police pushed protesters away from the square with pressurised water and tear gas. They also chased demonstrators down two main streets off Taksim Square. There are reports 29 students and one teacher have been killed by Islamic extremists in an attack on a boarding school in northeast Nigeria. Survivors at the school near Potiskum in Yobe State are being treated for burn and gunshot wounds. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the Islamist militant group Boko Haram has targeted schools in the region. A little earlier, we spoke to our colleague Will Ross. He's in Nigeria, and he said many were now questioning the lack of security in the area.
Well, this certainly has the hallmarks of an attack by the Islamist militant group known as Boko Haram, a particularly horrific attack, this one. It happened before dawn this morning. This is a fairly large boarding school outside a town called Potiskum, where there's a huge military presence. We understand that the men arrived with jerry cans full of fuel. They set fire to some of the school buildings, including one of the boarding hostels. Survivors at the hospital say that some of the students were burnt alive, others were shot as they tried to flee the area. But the horrific scenes at the hospital in Potiskum town, where one Associated Press reporter has seen, parents in a real state of anguish as they're trying to identify children, some of them charred, the bodies are charred, some of them, have been killed by gunshots. So horrific scenes, and many people there at the moment are, questioning the security that should be on offer in an area where there are so many soldiers.
Will Ross there. Her fourth person has been arrested by police investigating the disappearance of a mother from Manchester. Rania Aliad was reported missing on Tuesday but has not been seen since early June. A 38-year-old man from Salford has been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. One person was arrested on suspicion of murder and two over assisting an offender earlier this week. A former senior officer from Scotland Yard has admitted authorising a secret recording of a meeting between Stephen Lawrence's friend, Dwayne Brooks, his lawyers and detectives. A lawyer for Dwayne Brooks said it would take time for her client to absorb what she had called the enormity of the admission that the Met had deliberately deceived him in the guise of providing him with victim support. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell gave us the latest a little earlier.
Well, this meeting took place in May 2000, so just to put this into context, that was 7 years after Stephen Lawrence was killed, 11 years before two men were convicted of the killing, and just a year after the Macpherson inquiry reported back very critical of the Metropolitan Police's handling of the investigation. So that's the context. Now, John Grieve was in charge of the investigation at the time, and he's told the BBC that the reason he started the recording was to keep an unassailable record of discussions with Mr. Brooks. He said he feared that if he'd asked any of the participants in the meeting whether he could record it, then they would have been refused, and valuable evidence, he says, could have been lost. He adds he wasn't in the business of deliberately tricking or deceiving anyone, and deeply regrets any distress, dismay or alarm that he may have caused to either Dwayne Brooks or to Stephen Lawrence's parents. Now, in a statement, the Metropolitan Police say they believe that the relevant policy was followed by John Grieve at the time when he authorised this recording. They're now looking into the whereabouts of that recorded material and also looking into any other meetings might have been taped. Following on from that, we've had a tweet from Dwayne Brooks this morning who said, "Let's be honest here, does anyone actually believe the covert recording only happened once?" Now, this is, of course, another twist in the Lawrence investigation. Late last month, we heard from an undercover policeman who claimed that he'd been asked to find some information on the Lawrence family to smear them. Now, that led to a meeting between Stephen Lawrence's parents and the Home Secretary, Theresa May. There are two separate investigations going on involving those claims. The Lawrence family are calling for a public inquiry.
Sarah Campbell there. Now, the centre of a small town in the Canadian province of Quebec has been destroyed after a train carrying petroleum products was derailed and then exploded. The train was travelling in the early hours of the morning past the town of Lac-Mégantic, that's close to Quebec's border with Maine, when it came off the rails. According to Canadian television, 4 pressurised tanker cars blew up, destroying 30 buildings. Police officials say they fear more tanker cars are at risk of exploding. Around 1,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Very dramatic scenes there in this town with the derailment. Now, we've spoken to a spokesman for Quebec Provincial Police.
There are many dangers, of course. There's the smoke that could cause a hazard to the people in the area. Of course, the water will also is a problem because of the fact that there was some crude oil, and the fact that the crude oil has been leaking in the environment and the lake nearby. So yeah, there's a perimeter of 1 kilometer around that has been closed, and that of course is the the immediate emergency perimeter that has been established. But from then on, we'll try to determine if there are any fatalities, and we do fear that there are going to be fatalities. And from now on, we're trying to locate the people that they are still missing.
Well, a spokesman for Quebec Police there is a report just from a few minutes ago that the train had actually been parked up and somehow ended up without any crew on board moving again. But that is speculation at the moment at that particular town in Quebec. Now, Pope Francis has given his final approval for two previous popes to be declared saints. John Paul II and John the 23rd are now expected to be canonised by the end of the year. Tim Nielsen reports.
A fast track to sainthood for the Pope who streamlined the process. In the early 80s, Pope John Paul II made the path to sainthood faster and simpler and dropped the number of miracles required. At his funeral, people called for him to be made a saint immediately. 8 years on, Pope Francis has given his approval for the canonization. It's one of the fastest progressions to sainthood in modern history. It follows a second miracle being attributed to him. It's claimed to have occurred here in Cartago, Costa Rica. Floribet Mora says she suffered from swelling in the brain that was inexplicably cured on the 1st of May 2011, the date of John Paul's beatification. She says she prayed for the Pope to heal her before falling asleep, and when she woke, these photos seemed to speak to her.
I heard something telling me, get up, and I saw his hands do this, don't be afraid. And I got up from my bed and I said, yes, I feel good.
Her neurosurgeon says he cannot explain her recovery.
I was surprised because it's strange and it's never happened to me before for an aneurysm of such magnitude to just disappear.
John Paul II was born in Poland, where the news of his sainthood has been met with delight.
Many people who haven't heard of John Paul II, even though he was Pope, might now take the time to learn about him.
I'm thrilled that this whole process is ending. I thought it would happen a little more quickly, though.
Pope Francis has also approved the sainthood of Pope John the 23rd. He's waived Vatican rules to do so, as Pope John had only been attributed with one miracle. No date has been given for the canonizations, but a ceremony is expected to take place later this year. Tim Nielsen, BBC News.
It is time to catch up now with the weather forecast of